So we'll see the process of implantation here. So as a background, we'll just move here. We've got this egg cell running through the oviduct of the fallopian tube. So if the sperms are released as it is passing through the oviduct, then fertilization occurs, and it moves here by the fourth day. Smaller, fourth day after fertilization. After fertilization, day 4, it enters the uterus, and there again it stays there for a couple of days, almost 2 to 3 days. It's just hanging around here, trying to take in some nutrients from the female reproductive tract. Okay, so this is what we are trying to see, how it implants itself on the walls of the uterus. And we also know that as soon as the egg is released from the ovary, this corpus luteum secretes progesterone. Progesterone is circulated throughout the body within 5 minutes, and it also comes here down into the myometrium. This uterus is made of myometrium. And this part, this lined part, is known as the endometrium. So endometrium prepares itself in order to receive this blastocyst. And I've often drawn a diagram like this to denote a blastocyst. It consists of the outermost circular layer of cells known as the trophoblast or trophoblastic cells, which contain this trophoblastic villi. Okay? These are the nails or pegs which help implant or embed the blastocyst on the walls of the uterus. Okay? And then it has this fluid-filled cavity known as the blastocoele. Okay? And this yellow, master cells, this is actually the cells which actually form the embryo. It's also known as the embryoblast. So here's a bigger version of it. When the blastocyst enters the uterus, it is not like this. Okay? It is actually like this. Which means the difference is this: it still has its zona pellucida intact. The work of the zona pellucida is a little more than just preventing further entry of sperm cells. If the zona pellucida breaks off here as it is traveling down the oviduct, then the attachment of the blastocyst will occur in the oviduct itself. Okay, now this is going to cause problems, and that has to be operated and removed. This embryo will have to be removed from here because it causes complications, and there cannot be a placenta growing in the oviduct. Okay, it's not a place designed for placenta. Therefore, the layer of cell, the non-cellular layer, zona pellucida, actually prevents the fixation of the blastocyst on the oviduct. It has to enter the uterus. So once it enters the uterus, several changes occur. Okay? Before implantation, there is something called hatching of the blastocyst which occurs. Hatching of blastocyst is brought about or initiated by trophoblast cells. Trophoblast cells, these are the ones, yellow cells. They secrete an enzyme which breaks apart the zona pellucida. Okay, once the zona pellucida is broken apart or it is dissolved, then these trophoblasts begin to give out these finger-like projections that project forward. Okay? And these are known as your trophoblastic villi. Trophoblastic villi. This trophoblastic villi later on develops into the placental villi, which may acquire a structure like this with blood vessels in it. So So these blood vessels are the blood vessels of the fetus. Okay, now the trophoblast breaks up the zona pellucida and hatches a blastocyst. And then the trophoblast divides into two cells. The first outer cell, this is the outer cell, is called the syncytiotrophoblast. Okay, long name. But the work of syncytiotrophoblast is to develop the trophoblastic villi that we talked about here. Okay? And it also, the second work that it does is very important. It secretes a hormone HCG called the human chorionic gonadotropin. So the work of HCG is to prolong the life of corpus luteum. We just saw what corpus luteum does. It produces a hormone called progesterone. This progesterone is required for the further changes that needs to occur in the uterus as implantation and for the formation of placenta, etc., etc. Okay? But the thing is this, HCG hormone is also found in the urine after it implants itself in the uterus. Therefore, to confirm pregnancy, a urine test, a simple urine test is done. This is called the Gravidex test, which actually tests the presence of HCG in urine. So it changes, it's just a small device where it has two lanes. So if the urine is poured there, the chemical structure of HCG changes the color of one of these lanes, proving that, proving a positive pregnancy test. So that is the work of syncytiotrophoblast. Okay? The second cell that the trophoblast divides into is called cytotrophoblast. Its function is to form the chorion or chorion layer. Actually, the chorion layer is a little more complicated. It has several layers, but just simply said, it is the embryonic sac. Or you can say, this is where you have the baby, or the amniotic fluid is inside this sac or chorion, and the baby is floating somewhere around, attached to the placenta with umbilical cord. Okay, so the cytotrophoblast actually helps form this chorion. Then we move on to the last part, which is placenta. So if this is the place where the implantation occurs, later on this structure is going to give rise to, this is going to be completely submerged into the walls of the uterus. Okay? And then the chorion part develops, and the baby, and this is filled with a fluid, amniotic fluid, and then the baby develops. And this part, this is the baby. This part is called placenta, a disc-like structure which has a very important role to play, which we shall discuss in a while. This is the placenta, which is connected to the baby, or the fetus as it is called, by the umbilical cord. The work of placenta, it is the interface between mother and fetus. So it is where fetus and mother, they interact. The blood vessels of fetus and mother, they interact. So let's say this is the blood vessels of the mother, and these are the blood vessels of the fetus. And here we have mother's blood vessels. So they come in close proximity to each other, where exchange of material occurs. Okay, it allows exchange of substances, and the substances are the gases, oxygen going into the fetus and carbon dioxide produced by the fetus going into the mother's blood system, and then nutrients are supplied by the mother, and waste produced by the fetus is taken away into the blood system of the mother. Hormones and drugs. Now, the transfer of hormones and drugs is a little complicated than the transfer of gases and nutrients, because the transfer of drugs or hormones are dependent on the physical properties of the placental membrane. There is a very complicated system in which these drugs and hormones are passed on into the blood system of the fetus. Okay, so that is dependent on the physical properties of the drug and the placental membrane. Again, the placenta also separates the blood system or the circulatory system of the fetus and the mother, because the mother's blood system or circulatory system pumps the blood with a strong force. Okay, so that's a very strong what we call blood pressure here compared to the fetuses, and the fetus blood vessels can be ruptured if it's connected directly. So therefore the mother's blood, the heart beats and circulates the blood and goes back, and the tender blood vessels are prevented from rupturing up. Secondly, the blood may not be the same. I mean, the blood group of the mother and the child may not be the same. So that can also cause complications, especially if, not just the blood group, but if the RH factor is different, then it can cause fetal problems where the child and the mother can die. So that's a possibility. Okay? So separation of the blood systems of the mother and the fetus is brought about by placenta, thereby saving both. The last one we deal here is parturition, which means the process of giving birth. Okay? Now this is initiated by a hormone again, which is secreted by the posterior lobe of pituitary. Posterior lobe of pituitary secretes oxytocin, which initiates the contractions of the uterus. Now the uterus does not contract once and expel the baby out. It actually, when the time of delivery comes nearer, the oxytocin initiates the contractions of the uterus. And the frequency and the intensity with which it contracts begins to be strong and stronger as the day approaches. And eventually, on that day, it contracts and expels the baby out. And the best position of the baby would be, if this is the cervix, the head has to be towards the cervix, towards the opening, and the body with the legs above. So this would be the best position of the fetus for natural birth.